All right. So what are we talking about today?
I thought we were just having beers.
Yeah, we were.
Well, the
That might be-
government, in the midst of our beers, decided to throw in one of their 15 major reports that they have each year. They have one every month for the supply demand, and then 3 times a year they give us this outlier, which is at the end of March, the end of June, and then at the end of September. And they give us, among other things, a stocks estimate. So that's the biggest thing we got today was a stocks estimate and modest revisions to the 2023 crops, and then a new final estimate for the 2024 wheat crop. So those were our pieces of information. This is one of the more important ones if you measure it by how volatile the market is at the end of the during the day of those reports over the last 14 or 15 years. And I can go into those.
Yeah. I was going to say, did we learn anything on the stocks numbers, especially?
Well, I think we had some expectations with a bigger crop that we're going to potentially get a stocks number for corn somewhere near close to 2.5 billion bushels. And by my estimation now, USDA probably comes out on October 11th at around 2 billion bushels even. So we got no supply demand estimate revisions on this. They come out about 2 weeks later, and that'll be on the 11th this time. And we'll get about 2 billion bushels, which is smaller than we've been thinking for some time. I think when we had sub $4 corn and the market looked pretty poor, I think we were looking at 200 or 300 million bushels bigger. We ended up lower this year, and we're not finishing real strong in terms of weather for this crop. So
I think to kind of frame things up, though, the 2 billion bushels or slightly above 2 billion bushels is an ample supply of corn. It's just not quite as heavy as we thought we were when the market reacted here late last month and got us to, I think, 385 was our low on diesel corn.
August 26th, I think.
Yeah, I would have said prior to this report and prior to it sustaining the dryness, 380 to 420 was kind of a range for December, March corn, and I would put it at least 20 cents higher than that, $4 to 440 maybe now.
Tell me, Bill, the methodology on the objective yield surveys. We get one more good one in October. Do they finish that up in November, and then we don't get anything in December and wait until January, right?
Yes, the next reports are October, November, and then January. And the October one will incorporate more acreage data, so we could get a modest adjustment plus or minus on acreage. And then they actually incorporate harvest results from this. So we will get some actual data involved in
the October number,
yes.
10 days from now.
For corn and for soybeans.
11 days, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So what we had a corn stocks number, what about 80 million bushels or so below trade expectations. We're on a 15 billion bushel crop's not the end of the world, but it's lower. It's not greater.
It's not the kind of thing where there's going to be as much forced selling as we thought before.
Yeah.
And then soybeans were about as we expected. They could have revised last year's crop down 10 or 20 million bushels, but they left it the same, 342 million for what the actual numbers are worth. And we still get a big stocks number next year of well over 500 million bushels, even with clipping the crop a little bit. So that's still adequate to ample.
I would say that's maybe ample to burdensome, isn't it?
Yes.
You're talking that kind of stocks to use numbers.
Yeah, it's beyond adequate if we don't cut the crop too much. And I don't think we're going to. I just think that's a risk, not a reality at this point that we'll see big cuts in the crop sizes.
So that 385 low for D's corn on the 26th of August sounds like your bet might be that might be kind of our harvest low. The bean low of 955, that's Nove beans, that was set on the 16th of August. A little hard looking at the fundamentals, for me anyway, to see that that's the low, but I suppose we still have a South American crop to make. I mean, we're more than $1 off the lows on beans. And looking at ending stocks numbers like that, it's a little hard to believe that we won't go back down there or maybe go even lower, but I guess we do have to make a crop. USDA is forecasting record production in South America, but it's got to start raining for that to happen.
Yeah. And I think for corn or for soybeans, it's so much more dependent on other things that might happen. Like if we have a port strike, that could slow down our shipments out of the US. The Mississippi River's still low. I think there's some things negative there. I think, trade policy and the new administration, whoever it is, will be potentially a key too that could monkey up the works. Most of those are bearish factors on that market, but it's still like you said, the South American crops are. The news is always 30 minutes long every night, no matter whether there's news or not. So in the winter, we worry incessantly about South American crops, even though it may not be as big of a thing as we would think we do based on the time we give it.
Well, you mentioned these port strikes. The UP and the BN have got, I don't know if it's actually called an embargo, but they have stopped taking stuff across the border because I guess they can't get their cars back. You got this big backlog in Mexico. How big a hit could that be to U.S. corn exports? I mean, they're kind of our biggest export customer for corn, aren't they?
Yeah, I would think they will eventually take it. It's probably as big for soybeans, even bushel for bushel, as it is for corn. But it's important for both. I think that if we don't get these logistical problems solved, we'll start seeing week after week lower inspections or sales numbers, and that could be negative on the market. Yeah, I think you said 985 was the low, and I'd give 50-50 shot we go below that. But the corn, I think we probably made the low, in my opinion.
Every day, every week that ticks by that we haven't gone back down there on the corn makes it look like, maybe that was the bottom. Maybe that was it. Happens a lot where you'll have that low at the beginning of harvest or before that. Wise man, I think, once told me that. So, so did we learn? That's the stock side of it. Did we learn anything on the small grain summary part of this report?
A little bit smaller final wheat crop. Nothing really to worry too much about, I don't think. The stocks were big enough that USDA could lower their feed estimate from 110 down maybe to 100. And I'm at 130 million, and I could lower it 10 million. So some of that, the smaller crop, you're offset by a little bit bigger stocks than you would have anticipated, I think. It was about equal to, it was actually a little bit below the average, but I think we could take the feed use down in this report. So
yeah, we'll find out soon enough. But from a overall production standpoint, I don't think it was a game changer, really. It's a bigger crop than we had certainly last year, maybe not quite as big as what we once thought. And now it's going to show, we saw a decline in from August to Sep, and now we're going to see another decline from September to October. But at the end of the day, I don't think it really makes a big difference. You're over 9% bigger production-wise than what you were a year ago. So everybody feels a lot better about the overall production, and without respect specifically to these September 1 stocks, your projected ending stocks are still going to be at a very comfortable place next May, unless something crazy happens. So, I'm not sure that this really is going to do a lot to change the price discovery right now.
To me, the numbers didn't change as much, but the reaction of the market it seemed to be saying, and I could be convinced otherwise, that the spec funds, before they buy, they wanted to get past this report, and then there was money waiting to come into the market. That would be a theory.
I think that's a good theory, because I heard so many people, well, not so many people, heard a few people and read quite a few analysts thinking that we were going to see, in some cases, a lot bigger production. And so that would make sense. They would want to see if we get past this report and potentially, I mean, I saw one guy as much as 250 million bushels higher, which I thought was a pipe dream, but it was in print, and And so if you would have gotten that big jump in production, that would have scared those specs. Well, now that didn't happen. Now maybe they can put the pedal to the metal.
Is this one of those reports? I mean, we've had this before where we said the most important thing about this report is that it is no longer in the windshield and is now in the rearview mirror.
It
Kind of
instantly.
what you're saying is we've kind of gotten past it now. And now some of this money that's maybe wanting to come in on the long side is free to do so, where they wanted to see the numbers first. So we saw the
Yeah.
numbers.
I always think this report goes from, I mean, you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and we keep talking about how much of an important report it is, and it's the fourth highest important report for corn and beans, and then it's gone. Wait, what happened? It's already behind us already.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think we convince ourselves though this is one of the most important reports from a how much it moves price on report day. But you got to remember, you're kind of in danger, I think, of drowning in the river that averages 3 foot deep, because we've had some doozies on this report. What was it, 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
We found 90 million bushels of soybeans we didn't know we had.
Yes.
We thought we were out, and lo and behold, the cupboard wasn't bare. And so you do have this one can rock the market. It just, I think, pretty fortunate. Maybe it didn't rock it this time. It just maybe gave it a little bit of a nudge. Is one of the other things on wheat. You talked about money coming in on the long side. Maybe people want to buy. Is some of that driven by the dryness in Russia right now? Is that a much of a factor at this point, or
probably. No, it doesn't help. It might help their story on the buy side. That's 70% of their crop over there is winter wheat, and they're going in slow. They're going in, they're getting in, but they're going in slow. And that's always the old line we use always over here is, if you plant in the dust, your bins will bust. Well,
it assumes it'll eventually rain, but
that only works on wheat if you get it to germinate now in the fall, right? If it doesn't germinate, then you're kind of cooked. So, but yeah, I think that's probably part of it.
The macro side seems to, aside from crude oil, seems to have turned to one that might be a little more bullish, because we're lowering interest rates, which weakens our dollar, and a weaker dollar gets us stronger commodity prices. So that might be something that's supportive as well.
That rising tide that might be quietly behind the scenes, as we talk about all this supply demand stuff, might be quietly behind the scenes rising all boats, huh?
We don't notice it, but it is maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I know it wasn't on the report today, but I think maybe we would be a little bit irresponsible if we didn't just briefly mention the big run up in bean oil prices last week and kind of get Bill's thoughts on that. I mean, we had this, at one point we were up 6 cents last week, and then we closed up 4, with the whole 45Z thing and the Chinese stimulus package and all that. I mean, what are our thoughts on that?
That's a good question, Nate. And I've heard all those issues attributed to the increase, that the funds were short, that we're going to get some restriction potentially on imports of used cooking oil and inedible tallow, that we might get legislation from the government. And there actually was at least a token, if not more, proposed legislation. And 45Z is just a word we may never understand, but we keep bringing it up, and it hope springs eternal that gets us more demand. I think I've been thinking for a while that if I could have 2 forecasts, I'd like to do that. I'd like to have one that's about 38 cents for oil and one that's about 47 cents for oil, and depending on how the chips fall, that's which one we'll get.
You could be right on both of those, though.
Yeah. And last week was, I guess, slow to come. I thought we would get a reaction more quickly, and it finally started to react to the potential for more biofuel demand for soybean oil is kind of the thrust of all of that. The thing that kind of leaves you scratching your head a little bit is that's the oil story. What happened to meal running up $30 a ton? I mean, it's
right.
on a moonshot as well. And I've heard a variety of excuses for that as well, but we still have, with the record yields of soybeans and somewhere around the neighborhood of 7% more crush capacity coming, it's surprising to see meal go up that much. And oil, I could make a rational argument more quickly for.
Well, I think if you would have been sitting here a year ago and you would have said meal prices were stronger, you probably would have said we were crazy with the crush coming online. And we even have more crush coming online now that, the back half of this year and going into 2025. But yeah, I wonder
if that's,
go ahead.
I wonder if that's not a short-term thing though. I mean, that big bump we had on Friday was blamed on some plant closures because of the hurricane coming through and some nearby tightness. I agree with you, Bill. It's hard to look at how much oil. I mean, the 45Z story, if that's bullish oil, it's the opposite for meal. And yet everything kind of went up last week. Beans were up a bunch, oil was up, meal was up. And it's harder to see it on meal, but I wonder if that wasn't a short-term thing. Remember, we're just coming off of that NOPA August crush number of 158 million bushels and change that was way below trade expectations. We talked about extended downtimes. There was 1,000 different excuses for it. And I'm not overly worried about that because we got the beans to crush and we have the capacity, so the crush will come back. So I'm wondering if this meal story isn't something that we've got more ginned up in the short term here that will struggle, because I remember seeing one of your charts that you sent over in the last couple of weeks of Argentine crush. And I remember the red line went up about like this is my recollection.
The last month was really, really big.
Yeah. So you would think when we get fired up, the crush plants here get fired up. Argentina's finally crushing after a hell of a slow start after their new crop. You wonder if the meal market and the export front is going to have to be a fist fight. And I believe USDA, are they not forecasting that we're going to need record soybean meal exports out of the U.S. for like the third or fourth consecutive year? Because all the oil we got to make for biofuel. So
yeah,
I agree with you. It's a lot easier for me to be bullish oil than it is bullish soybean meal. So, although we're telling customers it seemed like it was oversold when it was below 40 cents. It kind of seemed like it was a little bit toppy here when we got north of 44 and a half cents. So maybe that's our range here for at least.
It might be a wide range that we have to live with.
Yeah. Yeah. But compared to the last 3 years, that's actually a narrow range. So at any rate, well, any final thoughts before we kind of wrap it up here?
I think that's all I've got.
All right. Well, as always, be careful out there.